Imagine a world where monsters exist that feed on humans. Imagine wild giant birds that are the only natural hunters to these monsters. Now imagine warriors who put their lives on the line just to train these giant birds to hunt the monsters. Welcome to the world of Untethered Sky. Hello and welcome to Wrapped in Books. My name is Pega, I'm an author, and today I'm going to be reviewing Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. I have been wanting to read a Fonda Lee novel for quite some time now. I wanted to read the Greenbone Saga, but it was a really long series and I didn't quite have the time to tap into it. So when I saw Untethered Sky and I realized that it's a very short fantasy book by Fonda Lee, I thought I'd give it a try. The fantasy elements of this book are also inspired by Persian mythology, and I'm Iranian, so instantly I got interested. Now, before starting the video, I should say that fantasy is actually my favorite genre. I have read a lot of fantasy, I read a lot of fantasy, and the books that I write are also in fantasy genre, inspired by Persian mythology. So I went into this book with high expectations. Today is going to be a spoiler-free review. I am basically going to talk about the premise of this book, the plot, the characters, and explain my overall opinion of the book. If book content and book reviews is something that you're interested in, please consider subscribing to my channel so that you wouldn't miss the future videos. Now, without further ado, let's wrap ourselves in this book that is called Untethered Sky. Our main character in this book is a young woman named Esther. When she was a child, a manticore, that are the human-killing monsters in this book, attacked their village, killed her mother and little brother, and she only survived because she was able to hide. This traumatic experience leaves a lasting mark on her soul, which is why, when she grows up, she immediately decides to join a group of warriors named Rookers, who fly rooks, these giant birds that hunt manticores. From then on, Esther makes her life mission to hunt manticores and stop them from killing other humans. When the Rookers in the country are called on a mission called the Great Hunt, Esther faces challenges that she has never faced before. So the question is she going to overcome these challenges? Or is it going to get the best of her? Now, manticores have been featured a lot in many different stories. They are a creature of Persian mythology. They're portrayed as lion-shaped with a scorpion's tail and a humanoid face. They are extremely dangerous creatures, they're very powerful, and they feed on human flesh. Now, in this book, the natural opponents of these creatures are called rooks. In Farsi, we call them rokh, which is an eagle-like giant bird and preys on many animals, even wolves, lions, and in this case, manticores. The idea of having an animal companion like a rook might sound compelling, but the book makes sure to tell you that these creatures are not pets, which is why training them is a very difficult task for our rookers. The rooker's job is so dangerous that some of them actually lose a limb or two while training these birds. A few of them even lose their lives. They're huge birds with these killer talons that can tear you apart in an instant. While these birds are obviously magnificent, they are not to be treated as pets. This book is divided into thirds, I would say, and the first third focuses on the relationship between Esther and her rook named Zara, that she gets to raise from the beginning of the book until she's ready to fly. There are a lot of scenes in this part of the book, especially about the relationship between a rook and the rooker. And while this was sort of slow, I found it to be necessary to explain how the bond between the rook and the rooker actually works. So when you get to the end of the book, what happens actually makes more sense to you. The world building in this book is a bit lacking. The book is quite short. I think it's about 200 pages. In a fantasy setting, you definitely need more room for world building. I'm not saying there is no world building in this book, there is, but it's not the typical world building that you expect from, other fantasy books that are longer than this. We don't see much of the world aside from Esther's childhood home, which is described in a vague village somewhere, the royal grounds where the rookers train the rooks, and one or two cities that are also quite vague in their description. I was actually not too upset with the world building. It was lacking, sure, but I understood why, and I knew that the focus of the book is not necessarily on world building. The writer uses manticores and rooks. One of them, the manticore, belongs to ancient Persian mythology, and the other one, rook, belongs to later centuries, which was, after Islam in Iran. So they kind of don't belong to the same era. Some of the character names that are used in this book, like Darius, in Farsi we say Daryush, like Babak, these are all authentic Persian names. The name Zahra, the name of Esther's rook, is not a Persian name, it's an Arabic name. So it got a bit confusing for me when I was reading the book because it felt like the events of this book are happening in ancient Persia, but then you had these names and you had these inconsistencies. I wish there had been more research done in that area. One of the things that I liked about Esther, our main character, was that she didn't have everything handed to her. She is a relatable female character, I believe. She is not the best at everything at all. Her friends Daryush and Nasmin are better than her in training rooks and flying rooks. So she really needs to work for what she wants to achieve. Both Esther and Daryush, who becomes kind of, Esther's love interest somewhere in the middle of the book, don't seem to have any interest other than training rooks and hunting. Both of them, I would say, are also kind of shy, which is what kind of brings them together. We don't have much character development in the sense that the character makes, a long journey, because the book is short. Even though they lack a bit of depth, I could understand their motives and I could understand why they're doing the things that they do. The theme of nature and our relationship with it is one of the main themes that is discussed in this book. Can we tame the nature? Can we claim the nature? Or does it have rules and conditions that are out of our control? This is a question that keeps popping up in this book. And it is reflected in the relationship that the rookers have with the rooks. Rooks are wild creatures. They belong to the nature. They belong to the sky. Humans actually borrow their strength, but they can never own it. This is a discussion that has occurred in many books, and I liked how it was presented in this book as well. Can we actually claim something wild and call it our own? Or is it always going to be a free spirit that belongs to the wilderness? What happens to Esther when she's a child is obviously very traumatic for her. It even results in straining her relationship with her father because her father, at the time of the Manticore attack, is not home. And when he comes back and finds out that his wife and son are dead and only Esther is alive, this unwanted resentment starts building up between them. We see throughout the book that this incident affected Esther in more than one way. She has severe PTSD from that incident. She is now forever going to be terrified of this creature that has torn her family apart. I like the idea of having a protagonist hunt not only a creature, but also their fear. I liked the conclusion of this book, and I liked how the book finally resolved this struggle between Esther and her fear of manticores. This is one of those books that when something is written, it is going to be used later on. When the writer mentions something like the importance of the voice of a character in the beginning of the book, and this mention is going to come back into play at the end of the book and play an important part, I think it shows care, and it shows that the writer has thought ahead. The writing in this book, I think, is sophisticated. The language used suits well in a fantasy setting. Some parts of this book contain some gruesome scenes. I would say that this book is directed towards more mature readers. If you like fantasy genre, I think you probably will enjoy reading this book. I think even if you don't read much fantasy, this book you might like. Because other than, rooks and manticores, there aren't any magical, fantastical elements in this book. So if you're a person who gets confused or, tired by really complicated world buildings and magic systems, this book might be for you. Okay, that's a wrap for today. Have you read Untethered Sky? Have you read any books by Fonda Lee? Write your comments down for me. Please like this video if you like this video. I'll be back in the future with more book reviews. Until then, farewell.